Do you want to get the ladies like Chad Thundercock? Then you need his #1 secret, Tactical Soap. Pheromone-infused soap for men, proud channel sponsor of 21 Studios. I'm Anthony Dream Johnson, and I approve this soap. Order now at the link below. Use coupon code 21C for 10% off now.
Thank you for joining us on the 21 Report. My name is George Bruno, and I will be your host for about the next 20 minutes or so. We're talking with Socrates today. He was the opening speaker, and with a very profound message. And we're going to talk to him about his message to what I just found out was not just to men, because you said half your audience is women as well.
To my mutual astonishment, it actually tends to be women seek out understanding of men. They naturally have an interest in relationships, but what they find is that a lot of the mainstream advice women are receiving is faulty, doesn't work, and there's an effect to taking some of that information on. And so they go looking to other sources, and they tend to look for men that at least have a different perspective on kind of relationships. And I found myself kind of in the middle ground on some of this, like, I've been accused of being kind of purple pill or Captain Save-A-Ho, and I think I brought that up earlier. And, there's some credence to that, because I believe the sexes are actually meant for each other.
Yes.
And if you're a hardcore red pill guy, you'll sit down and say you're blue pill, and, and blue pill guys think, oh my God, you're still red pill. So I'm kind of somewhere in between. But the reality is I think biologically we're meant for each other. Actually, I don't think, I know. And because of that, I think whatever we do, we should be bringing ourselves together, not tearing ourselves apart. And I think a lot of, not necessarily the advice that they give, but the effects thereof pull us apart relationship-wise. And so I think the advice that I give is relevant to both men and women. And so, we kind of talked a little bit about that. But yeah, I was truly amazed that half my readership are women.
That's fantastic. And your website is manningupsmart.com. What is the name of your book?
The book is called The Map, A Personal Guide to the Sexual Marketplace. And it's based on a previous 21 Convention speech in which I laid it out and said, you've got to put this to a book. There are too many ideas here. And the other element to it is that I just didn't want to have a narration of the speech itself, because I wanted to provide more content, more in-depth knowledge, and kind of fed a lot of that out. The problem, though, is that having a full life, a career, plus continuously doing new speeches for the 21 Convention and trying to run a blog, trying to do a book on top of it, you had to kind of pick and choose. So the blog itself, while it's at manningupsmart.com, I haven't been able to be real attentive. I need to go back and kind of resurrect some of the ideas and some of the themes there. But I've been spending a lot of my focus on writing the book, which will be completed essentially today. It'll be for release at this Saturday for the house party that we're going to be having. And so we'll have a big house party and book lunch tour and be able to have the book out there and hand people the book.
How is the book different than other books that talk about sexual marketplace, intergender relationships? What would be the unique selling proposition, if I can put it that way? Or what makes it different than the entire bookshelf that you see in the manosphere type of books? Why is this book different, and why do people need it in their library?
Fundamentally, it's graphic in nature. So where most books are all nothing but text and may have a graphic, the map, literally, that I create is graphic in nature. So you physically can see what we're talking about and analyze things graphically. And as an architect, I communicate through a large number of media. One of the most important is graphic. We talk about blueprints and designs, but we also do specifications, which is nothing but text. But we also know, for example, that a graphic can convey thought, content, tone, visual, all sorts of communication cues in a way in which text wouldn't. So a picture's worth 1,000 words. So if I can sit down and say you're in the friend zone, okay, and you want to be a sexual viable option, trying to be more of a friend by going down the wrong axis, which is what most people do, is just going to make you a better friend. Okay, you can't get from where you're at to where you want to go by doing this. unless that's where you want to go. But if you really want to go over here, you need to go this way. And if we know that axis and we can define what that is, okay, and I clearly articulate that, so for example, the two biggest drivers of the sexual marketplace are natural selections, are biological impulses, and those factors are known. And I break that down into the three major components of anthropology of being survival, seduction, and then provision. So the physical elements of being survival, all the physical traits of being what would make a human survive, stature, strength, fitness, health, okay? Seduction, you have to be able to be a successful sexual being. How do you do that? Well, it's through seduction. Are you able to give IOIs? Are you able to receive that? Are you able to respond socially and appropriately to do that? And for men, women's hypergamous nature, women's natural sexual biological nature is going to require men that will pull the trigger, that will get sexual, that won't be a nice guy and stay a nice guy, that they will actually act on their sexual interest. The same way, men have a similar need, okay, within the seduction category of we want women who are accessible. It's great to be a flirt, but at a certain point, we want to be sexual with a woman, with you. And if you're not a woman who wants to be sexual, all of a sudden you're dismissed, and it lowers the category. So you've got that. The last one's going to be provision. And that's where women, where we're similar. The characteristics are very similar. So in survival traits for men and women, the traits are going to be very, very the same. But for provision, it's going to be very different. Women want men who are wealthy, powerful, famous, and have cultural influence. Okay, now men, we really don't care about those things. We actually want young, fit, and hot, okay, or beauty. And so that changes. And so it's understanding what makes that up and why, you can kind of score yourself.
And that's consistent with what I call like the swipe left or right culture.
Correct, yes, that's right. And by the way, that's natural selection. And at no point are you going on the social selection, which are the relationship centrics. And so then I evaluate that and say, okay, what are your relationship skills? Do you know how to maintain relationships? And part of that is what do relationship skills actually do? And I actually kind of teach some of that, and that's to reduce tension and stabilize things. That's essentially what, when we talk about communication being key, what does communication do? It reduces tension. When there is conflict or there's a misunderstanding, open communication reduces that conflict and tension, reduces violence. Okay, so that's a relationship skill. So, how do you rate yourself on that on a scale to 1 to 10? And then the second one would be, what are your relationship management ability? Do you know how to manage a relationship? And
so you're taking men out of the emotional zone and making it practical,
correct,
intellectual.
Right.
You're giving them words to use. They're able to look at the graphic and say, I am here,
right,
but I want to be here.
Right.
It's not a guessing game.
It's not a guessing game. And not only that, because you can break it out, whether it's in scale of 1 to 10 or whatever, you can then start saying zones. Is this a fundamental skill? Is it a basic skill? Is it an intermediate skill? Is it an advanced skill? Somebody at a fundamental level should not be doing advanced skill set. The nuances are going to be lost on them. Not only that, the reality is if you want to really improve yourself, remove the negatives first. What are the things keeping you from being normal?
That reminds me, Socrates, the phrase that we've been hearing, I'd say, about the past 5 years, when someone asks another person, so how are you and so doing? And the response is, it's complicated. It sounds like this book helps people eliminate that response.
It does. And you're able to kind of, in what you're saying, it's really geared towards guys. So you have this very analytical, kind of by the numbers kind of look. And I'm not going to say it's a formula, but at least you have a basis of understanding. Mm-hmm. And by the way, where I have the sex threshold, that you have to be above the sexual threshold before women will have sex with you. Same thing with the relationship threshold. You have to be above the relationship threshold. Those aren't static lines. They actually move. They fluctuate, not only by individual, but also in time and context and everything else. But if you have a kind of visual concept that you have this map in your head that you can understand that by being here and I want to be here and this line shifting, or if I'm here in the line, if I'm above the sexual and it shifts, now all of a sudden I find myself behind, but I haven't done anything and the line's shifting up, I need to move with it to stay above that. I can modulate how to do it. And very much like driving a car where you modulate or you kind of gear that appropriately. And so you can do it not only on a macro level, but on a micro level. And that's actually a separate chapter in the book or section.
And that reminds me of, in business, we talk about you can't manage what you can't measure.
Right.
So you have to identify where you are, where you want to be, and what direction you're going in.
Correct. Yep.
there's people who operate in relationships for years in the it's complicated zone.
Right.
So this could take somebody out of that gray, cloudy area and help them either move forward or cut it.
I literally have the key line say, never be lost in the sexual marketplace again.
Wow.
You may make mistakes, but you won't be lost. If you adhere to it. The other part I'll also sit down and say is there's more than one route to get to a destination. How much, and the route you take can be complicated, and have nuances. And a straight line may not be the best solution. One of the most common is if a guy is in the friend zone, and I locate in the fuck buddy zone, and there's kind of a defined area, free sex without relationships. You can go there, and most pickup artists will say, sell you the opportunity to go from, zero to hero, kind of the slogan. But the problem is that you transcend a certain area of that sexual marketplace, and certain people live there. And I actually analyze some of that. If you're going across that in a straight line, you're going to be dealing with the dregs of humanity. People that are low social tolerances, low physical appearances, and you're going to be spending a tremendous amount of energy doing some very uncomfortable things and getting poor results with low quality people. And a lot of guys get very upset with this because they have standards for themselves, or they come from a background where they have expectations. And a lot of this drives a lot of school shootings, to be really honest. So you look at it, and when men face rejection, particularly at a sexual level, and not just sexual rejection, but sexual identity level, there's a tremendous amount of anger and resentment. And when I've said before, is that if you can't resolve something appropriately, you'll do it inappropriately. And we've seen some of that. And so when I was giving the talk in Tampa that year, there was a recent killing in California at that time, and I utilized that as an example. As opposed to teaching the same individual to become normal, to remove the things that are making them, pushing them down into the friend zone, to remove that. And by the way, there's an 8-to-1 ratio on that. So if you can remove the negatives, it's vastly better than adding a positive. So you remove the negatives first, and all of a sudden you'll find yourself in the normal zone. And that's what happens. That's with a lot of guys going through the pickup community. But then they find a girl and they disappear. And so the coaches lose that opportunity. They don't ever get them down to the fuck buddy zone, which is what both were selling.
So I have this question for you. Years ago, in the good old days, men used to just self-destruct. Now they destruct others in their grief, in their despair. Hence, school shooter, incel, this type of thing. What has made that happen? It is in the light of history, it is a recent phenomenon. In the past, men would just commit suicide either with a bullet or over a period of 20 years, one whiskey at a time.
Alcoholism or gambling or any of the vices.
The vices. Now they're destroying others' lives. Why have we made that jump? What has happened in society and to men? Profile those men for me.
Now, I'll say it, but it's not just men. And we'll take one step further back.
Yes.
Explain social justice warriors. What are they doing?
Yes.
They're assaulting, they're damaging, they're attacking.
Yes, they're not just self-destructive, they're destructive.
Destructive in society in a whole. So I think in part we take a bigger step even back from both men and women.
Back,
And that's part of the talk is that, in many ways isolation is being promoted as a virtue, whether it's MGTOW and men going their own way, or social justice warriors with being a strong, independent woman. They're both advocating isolation and loneliness. But we've sat down and enabled society to say this behavior is okay, and where it goes unfettered, you start seeing more. So if you don't weed the garden, you're going to get more weeds, and weeds are prolific. And when you have a culture that's leaning to sexual identity politics, any of that sort of kind of the theoretical, philosophical stuff, and they promote that, and they promote victimhood. And by the way, it's terribly empowering to be a victim. You all of a sudden are accorded rights and respects you've never earned. And when we give license to that, there's no difference. And I haven't seen anybody who's killed other people, in particularly school shootings, that hasn't felt entitled and felt they weren't a victim. Every one of these shooters were angry.
They're evening the score somehow.
And man, do they want you to pay, and they want you to feel it. And look at the choice of targets. Children. like themselves. They want you to feel it, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, I think that the community should respond to some of this, and I think events like this, in many ways, we know that is preventing a lot of it. And we know it, not so much that we have school shooters in our midst, because everybody has that capacity, but we do know that there's been a number of people who have said, look, I was suicidal, or my life was heading this particular way, or I can't believe that after coming to an event like this that I went better part of a year, and it only occurred to me that I only thought about killing myself once.
Yeah.
And you're kind of struck, and that was never our intent, but that's kind of a ramification of men helping and developing themselves and fulfilling these personal voids. But the other part is we demand that you have self-agency. And as a society, we're not enforcing that. We're not promoting that. We're not saying when you don't, that's wrong, knock the shit off. We actually enable and we showcase these individuals. And so I think we're going to see a lot worse, which is not a positive thing.
You mentioned a phrase, strong, independent woman, which
should be trademarked.
Yeah, as if that's a badge. But you never hear men say, I'm a strong, independent man. Why is there a disparity between the genders with that? Why do women say that, and why do men not say that?
I believe it goes back to the battle of the sexes. It's positioning perspective. And as soon as you say it's a battle of the sexes, there's going to be winners and losers, and it's them and us, and it's teaming and it's tribal. And I think there's something terribly natural in human species, the animal part, that's inclined to that. And it's not necessarily a societal better thing. But we don't sit down and look for the ways in which we're similar and we're compatible and complementary. And when you do that, the sexes are brought together. But to go back to the strong, independent women, we used to demand that, and so it was very much Me Too movement. The original Me Too was, I'm strong and independent, Me Too. Not the sexual assault front. So I think there was this element of that. I think that they're also following behind the trail of patriarchy rather than truly developing a matriarchy, if you were, that had its own identity. And so we are mammals, so we learn through behavior by example, and it's patterning. So it's natural to fall into thinking processes that have already been pre-established and patterned for you. And so if you have this element that you're falling behind the patriarchy, you're kind of, even though you're going to tear it down, but we're going to replace it with something almost identical or even worse, that you have that sort of behavior. And so women are trying to become more like men because they valued those traits for so long, they identify with some of
Are
that.
they being rewarded for that? I'm a behavior modification guy, and behavior modification rule number one is behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated. How is this behavior being rewarded? This SJW, some of the newer female thought, how is that being rewarded in society? Because it seems like it's gaining steam. If it wasn't being rewarded,
you wouldn't see
it would just
correct.
wither and die.
Right.
How is it being
Well,
perpetuated?
there's immediate validation. You identify with the tribe, and you're one. Not only that, you get tremendous respect, notoriety.
Me too.
Me too, correct.
So Me Too isn't just about I've been sexually assaulted. It's bigger than that.
Yeah, and it's almost a dead giveaway. They're telling you, like, read the card placard that people present. They tell you everything you want to know.
Interesting.
Is Me Too, Me Too, Me Too. And it's not even just Me Too, it's see me. See me, Me Too. I want, don't ignore me, and so there's that element to it. But it's short-term thinking process, and it's negative. And in today's speech, I actually talked about the ramifications of being a strong and independent woman when you have a biological clock ticking.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't care. Whether you biologically are infertile and can't help it, it's a biological fact, or if it's self-induced or societal induced, nature doesn't care.
Tell me some things about nature. Nature doesn't care. Nature doesn't lie. Tell me some other things about nature.
Nature will win. And it's going to sound horrible. When I was going through architecture school, it was kind of an ethics course, but they were basically teaching us how to be responsible architects and how to mitigate loss and risk associated with how we get sued for building failures and everything else. And it became almost religion that at the beginning of the lecture and at the very end, the professor would sit down and say, and water will win. So he would walk into the room and everybody as a joke, and it became kind of this mantra because he was known for doing it, that it became a thing, is that, and water will win. And I've just taken the same thing thing is that nature is persistent, and nature doesn't care about you, me, as human species. It's going to be survival of the fittest. And we relay that to a physical propensity, okay? You have a survival of the fittest. But if you have a moral and ethical unfitness for society, and you end up eradicating, self-extinguishing your genetic line because you're a strong, independent woman, you failed to have children in your biological clock, nature doesn't care.
Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, and the fittest will survive. And that doesn't mean necessarily it's a societal or civilizational best, but what's best for the species. And what's best for the species is that it propagates.
Do you think we've lowered the net in the basketball game of life? Have we made it easier for weaker people to win and to do a layup?
I don't think we've lowered the net. I think the threshold for that has been pretty low to begin with. I think the people that get scared by it, like a lot of the women that I know that are strong and independent, and a lot of them are close friends, their expectation for motherhood and parenthood have been raised so high that I think they have fears in that challenge. I know I personally felt that, is that my awareness of what it meant to be a good father or a parent, I didn't think I had the skills or abilities to do it. And the reality is I didn't. Okay, so I kind of knew which path I was on and where that path would end up. But it was my obligation to do something about that. Otherwise, I was going to be unfit. And so it was my personal challenge to sit down and say, where am I weak? What do I really want? And to come up with my own answers and solutions and create the world that I wanted for myself. And part of that was I wanted to be a good parent. I wanted to be a good partner. And I wanted to be the world's best father for my daughter. And there is no doubt that I am. And so you look at it and go, what are the challenges? And so I think in many ways that bar has actually been raised for people who are aware. And it's like many things. Like when you become aware of a subject, the more you get into it, the more you realize you don't know, and more intimidating it becomes. So the barrier to entry becomes stiffer and harder. And it does not help us that society and culture doesn't advocate for relationships or marriage and families the way it used to. And we've lost those supporting institutions. And in many ways, you have to then go back and reconstruct that. And if you don't have that, that's a tremendous amount of energy to overcome. And so I think there's that.
I've heard some people say I knew everything about marriage and family until I had marriage and a family. I knew everything about kids until I had kids, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how educated you are, how mature you are, how together you are, children will always throw you a curveball.
Daily. It's stunning, but it's like a lot of things in life. You can't sit in isolation and think you know something in an academic sense. And I think that's kind of some of the arguments I have with a lot of academics, particularly the people that I read the white papers. They're not publishing or putting stuff out because their careers very much would be at risk. But along those lines is that you have to field test. And so when we were talking about kind of a pickup organization, is that you just couldn't read the material in keyboard jockey. There was actually, you had to go out and post and be field, go out into the field and then post field reports. And by the way, our layer required you actually be witnessed doing such. So you just couldn't go out and kind of, I did this. You actually had to go out, because what it did is, while you think you know how something's going to go in your mind, it doesn't play out the same way. Muhammad Ali says everybody had a plan until they get punched. In the military, we had a plan until first contact. And then shit goes to hell in Hampshire. Are you flexible enough and are you skilled enough to handle that situation in context? And by the way, there are things that are going to come up that you would never anticipate. I mean, never anticipate. And that develops experience. Now, your ability then is to combine knowledge and experience and squeeze that into a juice we call wisdom. And that is a whole different challenge. So.
Some of the books that are written for men are only read by men who are receptive during grief or despair. Certain books by authors that we both know would be meaningless to some people whose lives seem to be going okay. Only when crap hits the fan, then you want to hand someone a certain book. It sounds like your book is appropriate for anybody at any stage, male or female. And it sounds like everybody's going to get something out of this book.
It will, but to be fair, I completely agree. We learn through trauma, and trauma drives behavior. I have no expectation that somebody who has a great relationship is going to find interest in the material. They're just not, because they're getting it right. But there are distinct pain points, and knowing that there are three major categories of people that I was looking towards: so the people that are in the friend zone, those people that are sexually viable in the fuck buddy zone, but below the relationship threshold, that that they have a unique pain point. The other is, and it's going to be a strange one, people who are average, they have a distinct pain point. And they suffer from being average. There's nothing remarkable about them. They're transferable, they're swappable, and nobody's going to invest in that. Nobody really wants that. They want more for themselves, but they haven't put the work in. And that is a pain point too. And so I think that it's a broad enough book. It probably could have been 3 different chapters or 3 different books unto itself and had been viable. But I kind of joke that I should have had a breakup recovery book as my first one, because that would have been a bestseller.
Yeah.
And then you go from there. I kind of did that with my blog structure. I start with the demise of a relationship and what do you do? It's a relationship autopsy, and then you kind of do assessments and everything else before you do all the relationship stuff. And so there was a progression in my writing on that. But this particular book, it does cover a large spectrum of multiple people. But I think people who are in healthy relationships that want to improve them or fine tune them, sharpening the axe, as it were, or sharpening the saw, is you're going to make better headway by having a sharp tool. And the way you do that is pick up something that you're interested in that's relevant to your life. And I think relationships are very relevant to people.
One last thing. The people that are watching this right now have needs. There's someone out there who's watching this right now, and their life they need something that's going to flip a switch. Tell that one person who's watching this that one nugget that could possibly change his life. He's watching this. He's hoping that he can just grab onto one thing. He has no hope. He's been out there. He's failed. What would you tell that man right there?
I would tell you right now, you know exactly where you're at. You know the path you're on, and you know the path and where it's going to end up. And there is a remarkable difference between where you are going to end up and where in the back of your mind, where the hero that you are, your inner hero, that not the Marvel comic book character hero, but the hero that you could be, what path that individual will do, what things that individual do. I would sit down and say, draw upon and lean towards being that individual. The greater separation between who you are and your inner hero, that behavior difference, the greater separation, the greater failure and lost potential of your life. If you're not achieving and you're not happy with where you're at, if you lean into your inner hero, you will make a dramatic change in your life in a direction that you want, that you can control, that is completely available right now. And that's a change of perspective.
I got goosebumps when you said the phrase inner hero. That's talking to somebody right now. Right now, their hands are getting sweaty, and they're writing that down. That's a powerful phrase.
Yeah, and let's talk about that sweat, that anxiety and that fear. That is an immense human natural reaction, but it's a reaction. Courage is what you do in despite of that fear. And courage demands rational thinking. That's the cerebral cortex responding, not the mammalian or the limbic brain, the animal brain of fight or flight. And so to be able to have command of that and realize, lean into that fear and anxiety and say, my hero can get through this, okay? And that'll change your world.
Socrates from manningupsmart.com, his book is coming out real soon. I look forward to it. I think you'll benefit from it. This is George Bruno from the 21 Report.